Well, lads, it appears that Kamala Harris has finally done it. The cackling witch has chosen her vice presidential nominee, and it appears to be that of Tim Walz, the governor from Minnesota. And what's so big to focus on here? It's that Tim Walz is one of the most ardently left wing people in American politics and says so openly. Here's the thing that I find so interesting, specifically about what Tim Walz represents in that of the Democratic landscape. So, the entirety of the progressive ethos for quite some time has been talking about how we need to excommunicate old white men from the field of power because they hold too much of it. But here we see you bringing in another old white man to be on your presidential ticket. And why could that be? Well, there's a myriad of reasons. One, Tim Walz being endorsed by the Democratic Socialists for America, which is huge when it comes to the fact of co-opting left-wing votes. And for those people who are so ardently believing in the fundamental ideals of socialism itself, this very clearly will swing them behind the Kamala Harris ticket. And here's another big thing to pay attention to. This whole concept of Tim Walz being an old white man, well, it's very clear that these things only matter on the performative front because what we now understand is Tim Walz being someone who used to serve in the military and was one of the top Democrats, if not the top Democrat on the Veteran Affairs Committee. Well, this could be something that they are using to go ahead and curry favor with veterans and people who are sympathetic to the military to go ahead and get their vote as well. Which, as you see J.D. Vance also being someone who served in the military, it really highlights the fact of what they're trying to do, and it's make sure they can take in every single possibility under the sun for whatever moniker they can use as a talking point to thrust into the landscape to say, well, look, we represent this, and that means we're more holier than thou, and look how noble we are because we stand for what's good, true, and just. Of course, good, true, and just in the eyes of someone like Tim Walz is quite literally democratic socialism, but nonetheless, I digress. You don't have to hear it from me. You can just go ahead and hear it from the man yourself.
For one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Just do the damn work. So I got to tell you, when I see this, it lifts me up. I'm inspired.
That's quite interesting the way that he phrases that because it actually reveals the entirety of the point that people at the base level operate on when it comes to the idealistic framework of socialism. So here's the thing. We're going to set up some clarifiers first. One, I am not a progressive. I do not stand for progressive values. I would make the argument that the entirety of the progressive era has been a disaster that has brought us the $35 trillion debt scheme that we are living within. Anyways, I digress. The fact is that you see him say, well, one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Here's the thing that I think is so crucial to focus on there. Again, one more clarifier. I do not support socialism in any way. I think it will bring the ruin and destruction of civil society itself, as has been seen consistently throughout history. And for anyone that's going to make the, well, that's not real socialism argument, I'm not going to shit on you. I actually understand why you would make that argument. I disagree, but I do get it. Anyways, moving on, the thing that we need to touch on there with what he says is, well, you see, one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. This is the crucial factor. The person on the ground level, the grunt, let's say, who's sitting there advocating for socialism because they believe in the standards of what can be created with a society of people that work together to create a cohesive whole. This individual, the person who wants to make sure that a child who has a bad home life, who has a rough life at home because of their parents treating them poorly, can then go to a school, get a good education, and hopefully a decent meal or two. That person that desires this, to see a child live a good life, to see people removed from poverty, to see homelessness stripped away, to see good education for children aplenty, that person is not your enemy. They are not a villain, and the right needs to come to a realization of this. We need to have a conversation with these people rather than denigrating them. You need to talk to them, not at them. And once this is understood, a true bridge can be built through the olive branch that can be extended over the bough. But only then when the right comes to this understanding. Of course, there will be those who are so completely siloed off with every ability to hear what you have saying cut off because they have no desire to listen to you because you are outside the spectrum of allowable opinion of what they live within. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth you trying to have the conversation. You need to realize that these people on the ground level, while they may be in total and fundamental disagreement with you, they are not your enemies. Your enemies are the powerful, those in Washington, and the mindset of those people who are sitting there espousing the fundamentals of socialism and progressive idealism. Again, while I say they are wrong, they are not the villain that you are castigating them as. And that is important to focus on. But you know who is a villain? Politicians such as this, like the man on your screen and the woman running for president under the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris embraces neighborly socialism with Tim Walz as running mate, as seen here on the Washington Examiner. Jumping into this article now for but a moment before we move on. When Democrats and their loyal stenographs in the media all peddle the same line verbatim, that's a pretty good sign that the opposite is true. And that's spot on, because what you see is the Democrats and the government itself is operating off of the Orwell playbook. Do not pay attention to the evidence of your eyes and ears. Only listen to the narrative of what the party espouses. Moving a little further down, we see it says the move should be understood by the public as a promise that the Minnesota governor is anything but neighborly, traditional, or sociable. Rather, Walz is a socialist endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America, and his record of running the North Star State into the ground should inform the public's understanding of Harris's plans. And the thing that I would love to touch on there for but a moment is, does anyone actually believe that a socialist was going to be able to do anything but run a state into the ground on the economic front? Just a thought. These people quite literally don't know anything about economics. They don't know how money is printed, why it's printed, what inflation is, where it comes from. It's unbelievable. But don't you worry, they're most certainly the ones that will tell you how it is that we have to structure the economy, and that price caps and price floors are most certainly important to set so that we can make sure that people aren't getting price gouged. At the base level, these people do not even understand what a price is, which is simply information of what the consumer is willing to voluntarily pay for an item. I need to stop with this tirade. Anyways, moving on. Here we see, one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Walz said just days ago during a White Dudes for Harris livestream, which I was going to make a video on, but to be completely honest, it was so cringe that it very well may have killed me or at least taken years off of my life. True to the mantra of neighborliness, it will be coerced at the threat of gunpoint, which is indeed how Walz is governed, and which is indeed how socialists and communists operate. While conservative and centrist critics alike have correctly honed in on Walz's abysmal record for enabling and encouraging the riots after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Walz's economic record quietly rivaled his destructive social policies. And what I would love to highlight there is that, yeah, obviously, there is no doubt in my mind that a socialist is going to be someone who has a terrible economic policy that rivals their terrible social policy. Am I supposed to be surprised in any way, shape, or form? Because I can guarantee you I'm most certainly fucking not. Anyways, moving on now to something that I thought was quite interesting, which was even before we saw this presidential candidacy pop off, well, this ticket had already made a team up before. Here we see from the Post-Millennial, Kamala boosted bail fund for Minnesota rioters after Walz let them torch Minneapolis. Is that so? Yes. Yes, it most certainly is. And you can go ahead and check that out in your own time, because it was something that was one of the most talked about factors during the presidential candidacy of Donald Trump, that someone like Kamala Harris was willing to come forward and pull money together for people who were quite literally destroying black-owned businesses, which this whole thing of the George Floyd protests, which then turned into riots, was supposed to be about black people. But no, don't you worry. It doesn't matter if we destroy their property and ruin their ability to create sustainability in the market and thus propel themselves upwards through the economic ladder. All that matters is the performative flag that we wave, which is exactly what progressives love to do. And that is something that we can most certainly understand. Every single standard visited upon us by that of the Democratic Party is nothing more than performative and a game to show the world, a stage for them to dance upon. And if you need an example of that, well, here we have another staged conversation with Kamala Harris and her campaign acting as if this doesn't look like the most obvious piece of propaganda ever put forward.
Hi, this is Tim.
It's Kamala Harris. Good morning, Governor.
Good morning, Madam Vice President.
Listen, I want you to do this with me. Let's do this together. Would you be my running mate and let's get this thing on the road?
I would be honored, Madam Vice President.
The joy that you're bringing back to the country, the enthusiasm that's out there, it'll be a privilege to take this with you across the country.
Well, let me tell you, I have just the utmost respect for you. I have really enjoyed our work together. You understand our country. You have dedicated yourself to our country in so many different and beautiful ways. And we're going to do this. We're going to win. and we're going to unify our country and remind everyone that we are fighting for the future for everyone. So let's get out there and get this done, okay?
Let's do it. Do the work in front of us. Let's win this thing.
That's right. All right, buddy. I'll see you soon. Take care. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
I must admit, it's almost impressive that this campaign would be willing to put something out as fake as this, not once, but twice, because the first time we saw it was Kamala Harris talking to Barack and Michelle Obama, and then we see it's her talking to her vice presidential pick. Of course, all of this very clearly staged as the day is long, but they'd love to act like this was just natural, you see. Why can't they just do this like normal human beings? Like, this is who I've chosen and this is why I've chosen them. You have to set up this staged nonsense, and because of this, you would realize that there's really only a dichotomy of two things that exist within this framework. It is either, one, you believe that the lemmings that exist within the vote blue no matter who mindset, the ones who will gladly do whatever is said by the Democrat Party, who are quite literally NPCs that utter nothing more than talking points when the mousetrap goes off in their brain because someone says something that they disagree with and they only have one pre-programmed response to actually levy at their opposition, or you believe that you have so much capability to control the levers of power with the institutional apparatus that you yourself are operating as the mouthpiece of, and you are so certain in the outcome of what lies over the horizon that you know that you can put anything into the political landscape and it will mean everything works out just fine for you. I don't know which it is, but it's an interesting dichotomy to think about. Now let's go ahead and jump in and see what we've got from Business Insider talking about how progressives finally have a major victory with Kamala Harris. Here we see Harris hands progressives a major victory by selecting Governor Tim Walz as her VP. And I would love to highlight this specifically only for the fact of what Tim Walz is good on in the eyes of the progressives is something that Kamala Harris has fumbled the bag on when you look at her record during her time as a prosecutor in California, when she was using effectively lifers as nothing more than chattel slavery to go fight wildfires, as well as keeping people locked up longer than they should have been, arresting people for marijuana and doing so militantly, and with these prosecutions she was levying at these people, well, they were ruining their lives, but does it matter to someone like Kamala Harris? No. Even though when going on a podcast, she herself was laughing and chuckling endlessly about how when she was younger, she was smoking weed. So, of course, locking up black men that she claims to care so much about and want to represent for doing the exact thing that she claims she herself had done really shows you the fact of the political class and what we're dealing with. But of course, someone like that of Tim Walz, who is far better on the nature of, let's say, not prosecuting actual criminals, that shows the fact of why he very well may have been put into this position of power. Not only is he someone who is a veteran, served in the military, but is also good on some of the issues that Kamala Harris is bad on. His record is something that is far superior to hers in many of these different lights, which very well could be used to bolster her claims that she will be better in the future on these topics. That is something that I think we need to pay attention to. Moving on now to the New York Times, here we see how Tim Walz embraced Minnesota's leftward shift. Well, here's the deal. In fact, what you would have to understand is Tim Walz is quite literally one of the most left-wing governors in the entirety of the United States. And if you would need an example of that, well, look no further than this from the Associated Press. Here we see Minnesota governor protects rights to gender-affirming care. And by gender-affirming care, we're talking about things like double mastectomies for children, akin to the 12-year-old that you see on your screen that is standing to the left of him as he signs this decree. You know, a double mastectomy, removing the breasts from a child. This is unbelievable. The fact that we would allow a child to make a life-altering and body-altering decision at an age with which they have no capacity to properly discern the nature of reality. We won't even allow them to do something like get a tattoo, let's say, but we will allow them to alter their body irreparably and change their hormonal development to the point where they will never grow up naturally in any way like most people have done throughout all of human history. Yeah, that is something that we simply cannot stand for as a society because it's a degree of barbarism that is equivalent to that of Mangala-level child abuse. But that is exactly what is supported by one of the most progressive governors, who is now the person who is running for the vice presidential ticket for Kamala Harris. Unbelievable. Here we see Walz signed a law allowing abortion at any stage in defunded crisis pregnancy centers. I thought this was an exaggeration at first, but it turns out no, it's actually not in fact. This is a man who stands for nothing, and if you stand for nothing, by all means you will bend the knee and lick the boot for any fucking reason.